We're going to go back up to number 5, which is to consider action on closed session items, which we do not have any this evening. We've already went through 6A. Now we'll be moving along to 6B1A, which is to review the purchase of video management system and internet protocol security cameras. Mr. Rosenthal.
So these are just additional, who's this good? Is this for you? So these are just additional, it's additional equipment for all the new buildings and whatnot, for
Yes,
the
sir.
most part, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
These are IP cameras that we've been using.
Thank you. Moving right along to 6C1, review the contract with J.R. Thomas Group Incorporated for portable classroom building installations, relocations, and repairs. Mr. Rosenthal.
So it looked like, I don't have this pulled up yet, but it looked like most of the expenses was for moving things around rather than new construction, right? Did I see that correctly?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. And has there been any talk yet about getting rid of some of these things and converting some over to the modulars yet?
Yes, sir, we have looked at that, but in this particular case, it was quite a bit more expensive to go with modular. So we elected to go with the portable buildings that we own.
Okay, and how many new ones are we going to be setting up?
Up to 22. We have, as we do each
Oh,
year.
I see, right.
As we do each year, we go ahead and add a little extra just in case something comes up where we need to. That way we don't have to come back to the board, but we will not utilize the funds unless we have to actually move something.
Okay, so these are actually brand-new portables. So there's 22 of them?
No, sir, these are existing portables, so
Okay.
if,
So like I said, so it's most of the expenses is moving them from one place to another.
some moving and then some renovation. You know, once you move them, then you have to do some
Sure.
work, some painting, renovations, ramps, and then the IT goes into it, power.
Okay, because it says number of portable buildings to be received, so you can read that and think, we're getting new ones, so.
No, sir, they're
Okay,
existing.
so we're just swapping, yeah, okay. All right,
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So I appreciate those questions, Dave, because we've brought up the modular and some different options before, so thank you for bringing that up. I guess my concern on this one is really the funding piece of it, because we've got over $1 million of these portable buildings funding, from what I understand, coming out of bond contingency, which would be financed over a pretty long period of time, what I could understand. So I guess I have a concern that we would be financing that over a 20 or 30-year period and not using some shorter term or general funds for this.
Yes, ma'am, and I would point to the board. If you recall, there is an established ratio that we use on the useful life of the asset, and at this point, we are well within that. Also, the way that we finance these items, we have a principal payoff that is often early in the debt. So if you look at it from that perspective, we do pay off those temporary items, if you will, earlier in our debt issuance. So we're not actually capitalizing that over a 30-year period, although we do use that as the funding source.
Yeah, so that's okay, but this isn't for purchasing new portable buildings. It is, some of it would be some construction that would be walkways and things like that, but it's only really meant for the time that portable building is there, and then we're moving it on to another place when we open schools or when we do rezoning. So I think we're hard pressed to say that it's really only for a short time is what I think, and I'm not, I recognize you're trying to modify that or reassure me. I'm just saying that from what I can understand, it seems like not a thing that should be financed, because it's, unless it's only really in a over a very short term, because it's not going to be used for very long.
Yeah, you're basically using kind of bond money for services, for the most part, for moving things around, right?
All right, moving to 6C2A, review the purchase of commercial washers and dryers. Six C two B, review the purchase of copier lease, maintenance, and related items. 6C2C, review the purchase of glass maintenance, replacement, and related items. Ms. Haliger?
I did have a question. Do we have, back to the copier and lease agreement, I know, I get it, we have to do that, but what's our go green methodology here, philosophy to get rid of some of these copiers and whatnot?
Yeah, Long, you might want to address that.
Paperless system.
They both look like, huh?
We are trying, if I'm trying to remember, can you answer that? Because I don't know off the top of my head.
So there are a couple of items when we look at the copiers. Obviously, if in a perfect world, we would be able to eliminate them, but there's still a lot of classroom instructional material that gets distributed by the teachers that can't necessarily be done on the iPads, particularly as it relates to testing. So when we scale this out, we do look at ways that we can bring it back, but the short answer is we do have some green options as it relates to the toner and some of the print settings that use less toner in terms of paper if they print on both sides. But a lot of times what we find is that when they print it on both sides, people get, it's one of those personal preference things. So
Yeah, thanks. I definitely understand the printing on both sides. I can't read it and I can't see it if it's done that. But the reason why I'm asking is that a lot of times when we have printers, that it's not the printer, it's really the maintenance and the toners and those kind of things really where the cost is, right? And so ensuring that we've kind of done like a full audit of what's actually being utilized, what's, can we centralize some certain printings in certain areas, that kind of thing, to get rid of some of that stuff. I mean, I get, paper is necessary for especially our younger kiddos, but
That's why I'd asked
Yeah.
Long to kind of
Yeah,
speak.
so-
That's why I'd asked Long to speak to
Yeah,
it.
so
because
that I can speak to. So we do on our new ed spec that we define as a group printing, what that size is. And then we started to document the or inventory all of our printers around the campuses and start seeing exactly how many of what and who's using what. From there, we can start, and also with this coming along, we can provide a better assessment of how can we group those printers together, and create a standard, if you will. It will, from our projection, is that it will take about a couple of years to, I hate to use the word wean them off, but basically migrate them off of their own personal printer into a group printing scenario. Not only do you have to create a place for it, but we also have to make sure that we have all the connectivities available to those areas.
yeah, but when it's not like you have to be connected anymore. Everything is wireless, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I can print right now.
Understood.
I can print right now to my house, right? So.
Yeah. No, what we really face more than anything is the culture. I've been working with this for 25 years, and the consistent conversation has been, how do we spend less on printing, less on copiers, less on printers? But part of it is a quality of life issues that teachers feel if they can't be steps away or have their printer on their own desk, if they've got group printing to have to go down the hall and those kinds of things. And it's really a morale issue trying to transition. So it's really going to be a major culture shift that we've been working on a very, very long time, but it's very exceptionally challenging to shift the mindset.
I get it. Okay.
We do have the project management team that's also doing some work to audit so that we can minimize the number of copiers and printers as
Yeah,
well. But
I don't-
it'll,
I want to make sure I'm clear into TV land. I'm not trying to get rid of the whole printing concept, because I get that makes sense. But just to see how we centralize that, reduce the amount of printers, toners, those things are super, super expensive.
and I think that's what the project management team is engaged in, just doing an audit so that we can see if there's a space for reduction.
Thank you.
Yeah, last month, the board approved 2 months ago, the board approved Print Logic, and that was the first step for us to start getting the centralized managing of these printing.
And
Mr.
if I
Rosen.
may, related to that, the new copier system that we are recommending to the board includes a much better way to control the clicks, which is a number of copies that go through the machine. And as it stands right now, you could say all the clicks are centralized at the district level. We'll be able to actually assign a number of clicks to each campus based on what their use is, and if they exceed that, there would be a cost to the campus, as opposed to right now where I can print anything I want and there's no cost directly to me. So this will help, I think, control some of that as well.
How does that,
I'm sorry?
so if we say you have 25 clicks, and then you go over 25 clicks, then X school has to then pay for it, you think that's gonna control the amount of printing that's happening on campus?
Once there's a realization there's a cost associated with a click, yes, we believe that will. Because if I mistakenly print 100 copies, or print 100 copies and only distribute 20 of them, there's no true cost to the school. However, the central office is picking up or administration is picking up that cost.
Okay.
Mr. Rosenthal?
So what you just say, that's true, okay? But y'all need to be real careful with this, okay? Because there's a lot of times when you're sitting in the classroom and you maybe thought you printed out 100 things, but you didn't, and now you got a class sitting there with nothing to hand them. And that printer real close to you comes in handy, because otherwise you make a click and it's down the hall. You can't leave your classroom. There may not be somebody that can bring it to you, and your lesson, and those kids just lost. So there's a real balance, okay? So it may be a nice cultural thing to have a print, but it's also very useful sometimes, okay? So just, sometimes it's just the cost of doing business. I understand. It's certainly fine to get people to understand that, okay, if you only need 10 things, don't go print off 100, or make sure it works first. Make sure if you're printing on both sides and you're trying to do something fancy with it, just make sure it works before you waste 100 pieces of paper, But you got to be real careful with that, because the morale turns the other way if you try to clamp down on it too much, and you don't want that.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Ms. Helliger? Moving along to, we went back to 6C2B. We're going to move now to 6C2D. Review the purchase of additional purchasing cooperatives for elevator service, maintenance, repair, and related items. Six C2E. Review the purchase of secondary enterprise internet services with AT&T Corp. All right. 6C3A. Review the guaranteed maximum price for high school 12 construction. Mrs. James.
So I have a question about this. What was the original construction budget in the bond, or was that broken out in the when we approved the budgets back a year or 2 years ago, or whenever it was, year and a half ago?
Yes, ma'am, in December of 18 was when y'all approved the budget, and the project budget was 180.9 million.
Okay, and what was the construction part of that?
The construction part of that is 130, 301, 193.
130 million.
Yes, sir, 130 million, 300,
I was like, there's not enough digits there.
301, 193.
Got it, okay, thank you. And then, so this is coming in a little bit over what the original budget is. About
The original
budgets.
construction budget, but well within our overall budget. And one of the things that you'll notice on, well, I was actually going to show page 96. If you go to page 96. So one of the things that you'll notice, so that the GMP that we're receiving is at 75% construction documents. This project, the contractor doesn't bid this project until Wednesday, this day after tomorrow. And, so there's quite a few allowances that have to go in when you're receiving the GMP before you have, final documents. There has to be quite a few allowances. But the one that I want to take your eyes to is the contract savings contingency, which has 0. So that starts with 0 because that is where, as the contract, once we get all the subs and everybody in place, and then as he starts buying out contracts, then that is where the money will be populated. And then any use of that contingency will have to have approval from the district before it's utilized.
Okay, and that's from the price agreements and the specification, I guess, on the from the bid.
Yes, it's based on our contract that we entered into.
Okay. So that's good, because my next question was going to be about cost savings incentives and how do we incentivize our contractor to save us money?
Well, we're going to be at the bid opening, so we're going to definitely be looking at the bids that come in. We're going to make sure that we receive the best value, from the subcontractors and the best value subcontractor that we can get. The best value is not always the low one. I mean, this is a very complex project, and we want to make sure that we have good subs so that the contractor can be successful and we can be successful and open the building. But at the same time, as I said, we will have eyes on it. We're going to be having input, and we're not going to we're going to be frugal, but we still want the best value.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, could you scroll down to the next page, please? One more, up a little bit. That table there. So when I saw this, it looks like the square footage keeps coming down. So, can you comment on that? Is that the actual building, or is it why is that?
Yes, sir. So as you're working through this delivery method, you start off and basically, it's not fully developed. And as you go further and develop it, then things should be coming back. There's times it goes the opposite direction, but with the very tight ed specs that we have, we're able to go ahead and bring it back down. And before it gets to 100%, we're hoping that maybe we'll have that a little tighter. And then also, once we identified all the systems, we're hoping that there's going to be savings from the allowances that we've included in the guaranteed maximum price.
Okay.
Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. I was just going to comment on Mrs. James's question. So we have received a guaranteed maximum price at 75% of the construction documents. They're not 100% complete. So the contractor has included some allowances which may come down as the drawings are refined, and then Duratec actually puts it out to bid and buys out the job. As far as the incentive to the general contractor to save money, it used to be that we sometimes had a shared savings. But I believe Mickey Morris at one time commented that that's no longer allowable by the state because that she felt that constituted a gift of public funds. Now, I don't know if that's still the case, but anyway, in this case, we don't have shared savings, and whatever the contractor saves accrues to our benefit. So I think what I hear you saying is that you fully expect this price to come down over time, And these allowances are monitored by the architect of record, who still has to report to you, your team, Carolina's team, to get approval to move forward. And you'll exercise judicious oversight on that. So we've hired a good general contractor. You've procured that, and if we approve this at the board meeting, when would construction actually begin?
Carolina, can you help me with that one?
So we have officially procured the land, and so as soon as the board approves this, we are finalizing the details and the drawings, and we anticipate to start construction within the next couple months.
Okay. Is this in the city, Carolina, or is it in the county? I mean, who is the authority having jurisdiction?
It's in the county.
In the county, okay. So we be ready to go pretty quick.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you.
Sir, and I'd also want to just, one more thing. This is an open book pricing, and it also will be audited at the end of the job by an independent auditor.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Moving along to 6C3B. Review the construction services agreement with Crane Group LLC for Madden Elementary School 10 classroom addition. Is this going to be this summer? Is that when this is going to begin? I don't remember reading that in there, and I apologize if it was.
Yes, sir. We are scheduled to start construction this summer. We are making arrangements so that as soon as the kids go home for the summer, we'll mobilize.
Well, and it's going to be completed. I've had people in my community ask me recently. It's going to be completed at the end of the year, or what is that going to look like?
Yes, sir.
So it ought to be ready to go January of 2021,
It would be the fall.
fall of 2021. Okay. Thank you. 6C3C. Review the construction services agreement with Crane Group LLC for the renovation of Fort Bend ISD triplex buildings 1 and 2. 6C3D. Review the construction services agreement with E-Contractors USA LLC for new agriculture facility at Marshall High School. Mrs. Jane, Mr. Rosenthal.
So what schools will be sharing this facility?
So this would be Hightower, Elkins, Ridge Point, and Marshall.
Ridge Point or Willow Ridge?
I'm sorry?
Ridge Point or Willow Ridge?
Well, Willow Ridge and Ridge Point, correct.
They're gonna
Ridge,
come.
Ridge Point comes to the existing barn at this point.
Yeah, but that's at Hightower,
Correct.
right? It's quite a ways. Sounds like Ridge Point isn't going to be doing much. That's a long distance.
It is a little longer, but there's been, quite a bit of travel in both directions, and the location at Hightower can no longer be expanded. We don't have the buffer zones around that facility to be able to do anything with it. And we also looked at Elkins, and we ran into the same situation. There's just not the buffer with the homes that are around, so the best location was Marshall.
What kind of buffer do we need?
I don't have it right off the top of my head, but there's a radius, and Carolina, do you happen to know what that radius is?
I mean, I'm not against putting one at Marshall. That creates a long ways to go for folks down at Ridge Point.
Our new required buffer is 450 feet, and currently we have 90 feet. And so we have to have a clearance radius, and we don't have that right now.
Right.
And so the city won't allow us to renovate or fix or expand.
Okay, well, maybe we need to start looking at land down around Ridge Point for a new one down there too at some point. Okay. Yeah.
Well, don't we have some land we just looked at
We do.
as an option?
Yeah, I think as we develop High School 12, it'll be important to consider that as part of that site or in that region.
Ms. James?
Well, I'd like to agree with that because I think I wrote down 5 high schools that are going to be served by this barn, and that seems like if we're building another high school, that's going to be 6, and that's a lot, and it's too far for the kids to have their projects and be able to take care of them. And you know, we've got 2 barns over on the west side, and they're very well used, and I think that we've got ag programs at all these schools, and we want to grow them because it helps kids to learn responsibility and leadership and all the things that we've heard about. So, so I think we should see about where we might want to have another barn in that part of the district if we've got some land available. Because one of the questions that I wrote down is about access to all the high schools, and it just seems that it's pretty far. It's pretty far. So, yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so that's I think we made that point. My next question is then, what is going to happen with the space where the barn is right now at Hightower?
Well, the first thing is that within this project, it includes a demolition of that property, and then we'll have to go ahead and determine at that point what we want to do. If you're familiar with the property, it's on the opposite
Other
side
side
of the school.
It's the other side, right, of
Correct.
Trammell
It's
Fresno.
a little sliver of land that is going to be, you know, we'll have to look and see what that would be suitable for, or if we want to, you know, look
And
at.
there's some access, and it's dark at night, and we've kind of tried to patch that up a little bit, but I guess it's not a long-term fit, so. Okay, well, we need a land swap someplace so we can find a good spot for another barn. Thank you.
Ms. Helliger?
I think that goes back to the question from last week, I believe it was, around programming. You know, when we get our timeline around programming, because that will help us determine kind of what we do with land and whatnot, to see based on the program that we want to do, we need to place a barn here, a barn there. We need to place another, I don't know, some type of artificial intelligence, robotics, something, I don't know, but other labs in different areas. Because I know we even talked about having, you know, CTE capable type of functionality at certain schools. So maybe that land could be used for something like that as well, for auto mechanic or something like that. You know, some of those other type of programs that we can expand on our CTE program as well.
One last question, we're going to move on from this. Are there specific type of animals that are in those rules of the buffer zone? I mean, is it every type of animal or only specific type of animals? And
It is every large hoofed animal.
so
In other words,
does,
if you're having sheep, pig, cattle, all of those.
so I ask that because I would hate for someone that raised chickens or turkeys or rabbits to have to make that trip all the way over there if they could keep them on their own home campus. That might help determine whether or not someone decides to raise an animal, because once again, I'm not going to continue to say this, but an hour and a half of travel on top of band and football and all those other things is unrealistic. So recently went to Austin High School last week, and they had quite a few animals actually inside of the school. So I just didn't know what those rules look like, if we could explore that, and that way not everyone had to travel.
Yeah, at least until we have something new closer to those 3 schools down there.
Even that, if you could raise rabbits at school, you might have 50 kids raising rabbits instead of traveling an hour back and forth. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Thank you. 6C3E, review the construction service agreement with job order contractor J.R. Thomas Group Incorporated for the construction of new field lighting systems at Marshall High School. Mr. Rice.
I just had a question of curiosity. Are those lights going back in, LED lights?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. 6C3F, review the job order contract with J.R. Thomas Group Incorporated for renovation work at Hunters Glen Elementary School to accommodate the Second Early Learning Center. Ms. James.
Yeah, so I was very glad to see this on the agenda, and I'm really glad we're going to do some renovations to get that early literacy center going. But what I'm concerned about here is that we're funding this through the general fund, and it seems to me that we should be funding the portable buildings through the general fund, as I mentioned before, and maybe this through the bond funds, because it seems like this is a permanent renovation, and the portable buildings are just more of a temporary item. So that would be my suggestion, if we could look into that possibility.
Is there any thought behind
Yes.
that?
Yes, ma'am. And so at this point, the bond 2014 funds are all earmarked. If you recall, I came to you all and we looked at some money to purchase land, and then the remainder of the 14 funds at this point are earmarked for the expansion of the E-wing at CTC, because that's still required. That didn't go away. But with that said, we do know of some monies that will be coming back into program contingency that will not be earmarked for anything. Once that occurs, then we would want to come back to the board to go ahead and change the funding source. But at this point, I don't have that available.
Okay, well, I think okay, so I don't know what's happening with 2007. I guess those funds have all been used as well. It looked like there was $850,000 on the financial report we just saw that hadn't been earmarked for anything. It was listed as unassigned. So I'm not telling you guys how to do your job. I'm just saying this, to me, is something that should be financed over a period of time, or could be financed over a period of time. And the other item that we saw earlier, the portable buildings, I think is a short-term expense, and I don't think it should be financed over a long period of time.
So my takeaway, I think the direct reference you're making, Mrs. James, is that the portables are using 2018 contingency. So I think that's what I hear you advocating for, is using the 2018 contingency for this, and just flip-flopping them basically, and using operating funds for the portables. So we can look at that in the next day or two before we publish the next agenda.
Thank you, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Moving along to 6C3G, review construction services agreement with Martin Roofing for roofing replacements at multiple East Zone campuses. 6C3H, review the construction services agreement with Prime Contractors Incorporated for HVAC MEP renovations at multiple campuses. Re- 6C3I, review construction services agreement with Prime Contractors Incorporated for HVAC MEP renovations A5 and A6 at multiple campuses. 6C3J, review the use of 2018 bond program contingency funds. Next on our agenda are the audience responses to agenda items posted for this meeting, and there are none this evening. Next, we have our one and only action item, which is to consider approval of the purchase of 30 compressed natural gas fueling stations from CNG for America Incorporated. Mr. Rice, did you have a question or comment?
Are we voting on it tonight?
Right, may I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve action item 8A1 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion? Mrs. James?
I just have a quick question. So I guess I misunderstood about this, the filling stations we have. We have the infrastructure for them, and then the natural gas, the CNG for America folks come and do the actual filling themselves, or help us with that. Is that accurate?
That-
And we're-
That is correct. So they have a vessel that they have the compressed natural gas in that ties into the station itself. And this is an extension of that station for 30 additional that'll accommodate the additional buses that we'll be receiving this summer.
Okay, so this is just another wing, if you will, similar to the filling setup that we have right now.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm sorry if this was just said and I wasn't paying attention, but is this gonna be another slow fill? Or is this an addition to our slow fill existing infrastructure?
Yes, sir, that's what it is.
Are we ever going to have what would be the name for the system in which we could actually fill the buses up completely with fuel?
Well, that's a fast fuel system, and at this point, we're not going in that direction. This has been working well for us, and so we want to continue in this manner, and this is also grant funded, and so we're wanting to go ahead and be able to expend those funds.
Okay, I'm asking in a manner of being in support of this, but what is the range of a current bus that we currently fuel in the slow fill station? Is it 50 or 60% of its potential range, or?
Demetrius, can you address that?
And have we, and the second part of that question is, have we run into situations where we've been, I don't want to say in trouble, but stranded or limited to, or can you speak to that?
Yes, so we have not run into any situations where we've been stranded with our CNG buses. What happens is they run their AM route, they come back, they fuel, then they run their PM route, and they fuel again in the evening. And we make sure they stay all inter-district trips, any type of excursions. We don't send them out of district for field trips or anything of that nature. And whether or not we had a slow fill station or a fast fill station, that won't change the the range of the buses.
Okay.
So it wouldn't matter where we had slow or fast fill.
So it's just literally a matter of how long it takes to actually fuel the vehicle, not so much the capacity of what you're able to fill the fuel tank on the vehicle is.
Correct. That's part of it. And in order for us to have a fast fuel station, we have to have the infrastructure, actual permanent station, which require a lot more money and time to build out.
Okay, so there's enough time between the AM and the PM to do what we need to do?
Correct. With the slow fill, yes.
All right. Please vote by show of hand. Motion passes. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
This meeting is now adjourned.